Okay, baby shark, go on. They were dancing to Baby Shark.
Oh God.
Da, 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 da.
People just need to let things die. Oh, damn it. Bam and I need to record, or you and Bam need to record upcoming games like ASAP. Sorry. Squirrel brain.
Bacon!
Yeah, pretty much. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Bammsters Rated R podcast. Today, with me, I have G in the hot seat. We finally managed to wrangle G and get him back into an episode, and this will be his first one on screen. And, well, G, say hello to all our listeners, all two of them.
Hey, everybody.
So he's taking over from my position of the eye-peeling response to Bam, I suppose.
What do you mean? This is my normal talking voice.
So, G, this past week you had an opportunity to go to the One Up conference in Belgium. You said, and I'm going to say this as close as I can to mimic you. Kortrijk?
Kortrijk.
Kortrijk? Okay.
Kortrijk.
So, basically, I'm just going to grill you about that and
sure,
see how that went. Like pulling teeth with this one, it is.
Oh, it will be, definitely, because I'm so tired from running around. Oh, actually, there's a lot of sitting, but no. Yeah, lack of water. Jeez, I had an Airbnb where I couldn't turn down the heat. Every morning just waking up in a waterbed.
Oof.
Yeah.
Okay, well, getting that image out of my head.
Yeah.
But how was it? So where'd you start out? How many days were you there?
Well, how many days were there? Left Thursday, which is why you might have had a hiccup with some previous episode. But yeah, there's a conference, like a business to business conference on the Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday. It was a bit weird they didn't start that already on Friday, but Saturday, Sunday was the expo, the business to customer part, where regular people come in and look at games. And I focused primarily on the business to customer because that was kind of the interesting part. It is an event, it's partly arranged by some people from a school in Kortrijk where they teach game development.
Ah, nice.
But it isn't a school event. This is a full-on proper conference. Developers from all sorts of studios show up and talk and meet and listen to speeches and what have you. And they invite people from various disciplines to talk about game development. Last year there was, I particularly liked Rami Ishmael's talk last year on what you need to know. I think he did like a whole alphabet of things you need to know if you want to be a game developer in 30 minutes. So you can imagine that's about a minute per item. Yeah, it went
Maybe
fast.
less.
Yeah, it was fun. He came in a little bit cold, so he just kind of redid one he had done earlier. This year we had, Larian was there to talk about things. There were a story writer. There was a breakout session. That one I kind of sort of stayed away from, where you could choose different lines. Do you want to hear about this or that? And as part of that, you could hear about IP, intellectual properties, copyrights. There was a line purely on financing, how to get financing for game development. It's not an uninteresting topic. It's in its own right. Just didn't want to.
Well, it's not necessarily something that would particularly apply to what we do anyway, but it's definitely a necessary skill when you're trying to build, something with a pretty large vision. So
Yeah. The interesting was they started with a guy called Wim Walters, who's I'm actually not sure whether he is South African, because he said he came from down there. He started a game company, co-founded a game company called Grin. Some might have heard about it. And they did various things over the years. And he talked about the experience being small and growing slowly with more and more people, and trying way back when, 15, 20 years ago, to make Flash games. And then realizing they were making Flash games for kids. They specifically targeting kids. And the only banner ads that were available back then, before Google had ads everywhere, were pornography and gambling. It's kind of like, yeah, we can get these banner ads, and they don't work for us.
Yeah.
So they sort of started that whole web pages where you can just find a lot of small games, cute games, 3D games in a browser back then. But they couldn't monetize the damn thing. So they were in this boom bust cycle in terms of they could do a lot of things, they couldn't make money, then they fell over, and the company sort of not quite went bust, and then they tried something new, made a lot of things, couldn't finance it, and back down again.
Quick sidetrack. When you listed his name and the name of the company, it sounded to me like either a comic book character or a Bond villain.
Oh, fully. Yeah. Wim Baldurs. That definitely sounds like a Bond villain.
Now I want to know what GRIN stands for.
But they then had the big break where they created a game. They were working on a game called Wolf, WOLFE, based around Little Red Riding Hood. Side-scrolling, some combat, some storylines, some a very different take on Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Old Wolf.
I'm imagining the Kill Bill version of Red Riding Hood.
Not quite. And that was the thing, because they produced some material to get some funding. Microsoft saw it, pulled them into E3 and went, look at this game. And everybody got super excited. But people started expecting more than this company could deliver or were intending to deliver. And you get that whole, everybody wants this great game, and the company's trying to get to that point. But, yeah, the game now sells on Steam for $2. You can go and check it out, right? It's not a bad game. It was just, it broke the company, and it broke sort of a little bit the developers. And it was a super emotional walkthrough. I think it's the first time he's done this. I think it's the first time he's talked about this in such a, that structure. So intently talking about, building company with his mates. The company goes into a bust cycle, losing his mates, building it up again with some new people, becoming friends with them, having a bust cycle, building it up again, having this great game and all this pressure coming in, and a bust cycle. Yeah, the company is now bankrupt. It will never come back again. That IP was bought by somebody, which is why the game's still on Steam. And you can find it, you can play it, but there probably won't be a sequel, and it probably won't be fixed. The game has issues with the combat. So this was, if anybody gets a chance to hear him talk, it was super emotional, as it partly probably because it was the first time. But it was interesting. It was a good talk. I likened it a little bit to Hugh Monaghan when we had on back in Season 1, at the tail end of Season 1, talking about their experiences.
I saw you mentioned that, where you were saying that something about he did some really good talk. I think it was the year before.
Hugh did he's done it wasn't a TED talk, was it? It was a GDC talk, I think, on Brigador and how they forgot to monetize and market their game. So they released the game and it just went nowhere. That after they spent 6 years on it. So fun times. And there was just this one, Wim Walter's talk was one I think all new game developers should hear. I think a lot of players should hear it too, to understand what does it take emotionally. And at the same time, yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just at the same time, I think Hugh's talk. We had him on the show. You can find the episode. It's episode number 50. Nice round number. That's why I remember it. It's also one everybody, both gamers and game developers, students should hear, because it goes to that whole thing. What is it to be an indie developer, trying to make it today?
Well, and it's funny because I've seen and heard folks in the industry talk about how a lot of times indie developers underprice their games, or undervalue the games that they're making, and you see the flip side of that with players, where they'll talk about a $10 or $20 game not being, in their opinion, worth it, and even though there's plenty of content and stuff like that. I mean, in some cases, I do tend to, I'll either agree or disagree depending on why they're complaining about that specific game. But ultimately, the thing is, like, if you look at that, $10 or $20 is really not a lot of money to ask for a game when it comes down to, if you think about how much work has gone into that game.
No.
That's, even if the game is only like 2 to 5 hours long, like $10 or $20 is, I don't think, a bad price to pay for a game like that. If it's a game worth playing and having fun.
I'm trying to think of the last game I bought was The Order 1886, which came out 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 years.
But
and I paid
tying
10,
that
12.
back,
Just to do the value of it. I paid 10, 12 euros for it, I think. Pounds, sorry. And that's, people whined that it wasn't long enough, it wasn't good enough, and it shouldn't have been a full price. No, that's a full price game. That's definitely worth it. It has its issues, but that's an example of a game that a lot of people have issues understanding it should be a full price game because of the production value that went into it. The effort.
and that's where, kind of where I was going, is like tie it back into the things that you were just saying, that I think it is important for players, not just developers, but players, to hear a lot of these things as well.
Yeah.
To understand, because I think a lot of times as a player, and I saw this when working on some forums before too, being kind of a go-between in some ways, it's like players have these huge expectations, and I often wonder if the expectation management, to me, I've seen some people where they're like, oh, you need to modify your own expectation management when it comes to this, but I think it's kind of like a more of a partnership kind of thing, where it's on the responsibility of the developers in some ways to manage what the players should expect, and it's on the responsibility of the players to take that message at face value and not inflate it with their own hopes and dreams.
Yeah. No, I can see that. Fallout 76.
But it just works.
I'm not joking. The game cost £69. Disclaimer, my friends bought it for me. I love them for it. But on release, it was £69. That's just shy of $90. Wasn't worth it. Not that game. I mean,
I got the game for $30.
Yeah.
And it wasn't worth it because of all the problems that have been with it.
So there are games where they put in all this effort and put in all that work, but what came out wasn't quite worth it. Over here in Germany, within a month, I think it was a month and a half after it released, you could buy a memory stick, USB key, 32 gigabyte or something for 5-10 euros, and they would give you the game for free with it. They were trying to throw it at people, basically. We're up there. Well, you can have this game if I can throw it at you. Zoom. Okay.
Well,
thanks.
And that's a good point too, because it's not. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be critical of games, ever or anything like that. That's not what I was just saying.
Yeah.
But there's definitely games that deserve it. But there's been a lot of indie games, I think, that have been, in some ways, either underpriced, or I think maybe the players have undervalued what they should be worth.
I guess we should all just be happy that N-Space and Swordcoast Legends forums aren't around anymore, where there's my old post of a full price game of $60. What does that buy you? How much time on a golf trip? How much time in a cinema? And how much time in a Berlin brothel?
Well, and that is an important thing too, because if you look at that, most movie tickets in the U.S. are around $15-20, and you can go to theaters where they're less, $5 or $6 for a movie ticket. But I think on the average in most theaters that folks go to, we're looking at $15 or $20, and you get between 2 and 3 hours, maybe only an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes. So if you look at that and you're playing a game and you're getting more than 2 hours out of that game, then complaining that it's $10 or $20 to me doesn't seem to be worth it, unless the game is really broken. That's a separate topic than what are you getting out of the game. But yeah.
But anyways, these are talks that I think, yeah, you're right. Both gamers and game developers should listen to it, and we're probably biased, as you said. You did some forum moderation work with a game company. We've done this thing for a few years now.
That's a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. We've probably been exposed to it harder than a lot of gamers have, but it is something gamers should be exposed to, or the hardship that is in trying to make a video game, also on the indie side. And they're not the only ones. I can probably think of 10, 20 that could tell an awesome story. Game companies that come out, small game companies come out and say, yeah, this is our last game ever, because it's just not worth it. Rhyme is an example. It's the last game from a studio in the Netherlands. They've given up. It's an awesome game, beautiful game, fun game, but nope.
Well, I guess then moving on from just maybe some of the presentations and stuff, what were some of the games that you got to see, or some of the developers you got to talk to while you were there?
So I spent a good time talking to our friends at Goblin Studio, who have Legend of Kiba coming out, and I had a small look at that. And immediately I said, yeah, this reminds me of a game from 1987. And the guy looks at me and goes, I wasn't born then.
Oh my God. I sometimes forget how old we are.
Yeah. I then went home and double-checked, and I was wrong. The game released in January 1988.
Wow.
I was wrong, damn it. But no, very old, the game it reminded me of. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, Dragons of Autumn Flame, I think it's called. The very first of the
one of the
Dragonlance
Dragonlance games.
Yeah, so the very first of the Dragonlance books by Hickman and Weiss. They came out as a side-scrolling combat game, so all the combat is completely side-scrolling. Very weird. I could never figure out playing the game, but Legend of Kiba have a similar combat, but much more modernized. And it then goes to this modern pixel style. More colors than we had back then. Better definition, etc. But it played with some of the same thing, and I just gave that feeling like immediately when I saw even just somebody play, I went, yeah, this takes me back to bad experiences, admittedly, but I love Dragonlance, so might be why I remember it. And they also had a game called Snowtopia, which you're gonna hate because it's a sim game.
Well, you're going to play that one, not me.
I already played it. But it's one where you no longer have money, you have happiness. And you build a snow resort, ski resort. So you make ski lifts of various kinds. So, the bigger the better, right? And then you make slopes, skiing tracks, no idea what they're called, that people then will want to ski down. And you have experienced and inexperienced people that will then ride up and choose which slope to go down. You need to make greens and blues and blacks and reds and stuff. And I made a fun red one that was too aggressive, and then I made a green one that ran and then joined into the red one. So people went up unexperienced and had fun, slight fun, on the green part, and then it merged into the red part, and then you can just see the happiness goes off the meter. I hope nobody does that in real life. It was terrible. We tried to make people crash, but it was early days. I think we'll see more of that game in March, so expect something there. And yeah, just Goblin Studios were awesome. It was just nice hanging out with them, saying hi and all that.
Cool.
We met our friends from Cybernetic Walrus, Mike, who was on the show a couple of years ago talking about Anti-Graviator, or Anti-Graviator as I like to call it. And they are making a new game. Oh, something Last Humanity. Can't remember. Sorry, mate. I'm tired. But again, you're going to hear more about that very soon. Early March, if everything goes the way it should. Which is a game for you and Bam, I think. You and Bam are going to love this. It's a tactical turn-based game with cards.
That'll be one Bam plays.
No, it was a nice game, and it's pretty well polished. A bunch of humans survived that AI took over the world, and they sought refuge in a theme park. They're living in a theme park. They set up the base in a theme park, and then you're in a
Well,
theme.
I mean,
What?
you can cover your diet that way, right? I mean, think about all the different foods, the different fried foods at a theme park.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Post-apocalyptic, not so much fried food left.
Well, if you're living in a theme park, I mean, all that stuff is probably frozen. So as long as you've got the generators running.
And then the game sort of plays around with this, and you get cards. So every turn you have to play a card, or you get 5 cards. You play up to all 5, which gives you movement, attacks, etc. So instead of always having certain action points and you can just do whatever action, now you can only do what these cards give you. So it constrains you in a different way, it challenges you in a different way. You can't just play however you want to. There's that restriction.
Please tell me that when you talked to them, you worked on trying to convince them to add a bacon card.
No.
What are we gonna do with you, man? That's a disappointing answer.
That's in, you're thinking of One More Night.
Oh no, I know he added the bacon cart, which was
Yeah.
awesome.
Then
But
they lost
yeah,
the bacon card. That was the really cool part. What did it look like? We lost the model. Yeah, come on. Baconize all the games. So,
Yes.
yeah. Cybernetic Walrus it was just great meeting them. This was, because you told me to skip all the talking about parts. Friday night, there was the conference part where they did a lot of blah, blah, blah.
Oh, well, I was just kind of moving on too in the interest of time because we were already like halfway through the episode.
Friday night there was a game award show where the Belgian Game Award show, they gave out awards to everybody. And after there was a party. So when we met up with people Saturday morning at the event at the expo, some were drinking more Coke than others. Don't want to name names, but yeah, some were a little bit absent. Kronos, who helped arrange the event, I checked by one of the games they published to catch somebody, and there were nobody.
They needed some G Fuel or what are some of the other ones that have been coming out?
We don't have G Fuel over here in Belgium.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember you were complaining about that. What about some of the other ones that have been coming out lately? That's been a big trend. Is some
I don't know. There's a lot of things, and it's weird because if you go to conferences, you can find people selling G Fuel that they've brought in from Germany. So it is a thing here. But it was just it's an interesting construct. It was the same last year. They did the same thing. They had the Game Awards and then the Expo, and first day or first few hours of the Expo, you can just see people being tired. So yeah, and they were putting up posters showing who won and who didn't. One, I don't think they won, but they were nominated. Ghost on the Shore. You will want to play that. I'm not joking. I'm not taking the piss here, mate. You probably have seen it before. It's by a company called Like Charlie, and you play as a woman who's taking a boat trip to see some islands, and she sort of crashes on the shore of an island, and a ghost meets up with her and kind of takes up room in her mind. So her and the ghost have this dialogue where the ghost doesn't really remember anything. It's a ghost that didn't have any brain to remember with. It was a weird construct. But she's now stuck with it, and they have to figure out what happened. The ghost has been there for 200 years. So they walk around and see the place. And the one thing that really annoyed me constantly was the ghost is named Josh. I have a hard time imagining anybody 200 years ago named Josh. This doesn't work for me. But no, it's an exploration. It's a just walk around, see things, interact with things. No combat, no nothing. And it's just idyllic. It's an island setting. Lots of grass, lots of trees, and old buildings, and a school that's one down, what have you. So there's clearly people have lived there. There's a small school. and you have to figure out what happened. So no big action game. I know you're into your Wolfendooms, but
Well, you know, it's funny because I do get it that like constantly I love to play the shooters, and you know I'm on Destiny or I've been going back into Division 2, and but it's funny because I don't know if it's because these games are so much different from that. I do enjoy the mystery games, especially if it has a compelling story that just kind of pulls you in, and you know where you really want to figure out what things are going on. Um, you know, we recently just played Luna, and that's you know a beautifully designed and sounding game that's just a point and click puzzle game that you're you know going through, and games like that.
yeah,
There's something about them that kind of pull me in that I really enjoy those games. You know, just as much as the shooters. I may not play them as often, you know, or spend as much time in them as I do, you know, something like Destiny. But I definitely enjoy them.
I know you have access to it in our collection. Look up Vane. God, I love that game.
I remember you were talking about that one, yeah, but I hadn't played that one yet. I still need to check out Gibbous too, because that's another one that I'm sure I'll enjoy.
Definitely. Beyond that, what else did I really play? There's a lot that I more kind of just looked at. Nanotale, I should mention. I liked them. I played 2 years ago. Demo off. Wow. They won an award there. A few others as well won. There was because I have a picture of it, so I didn't have to remember. It's a game that's similar to the old Italian cartoon Linus, the character that's just a line. You might not have seen them in the US, but I mean, if you
No, I haven't.
spend time in your youth over here, there's a cartoon that was going around which is just, it's a line on a piece of paper, and every so often a hand will come in and redraw the line and draw things, erase things, erase the line, the little character complain. And there was a Feel Good, Phil good, Feel Good, like feel good, made by an Italian guy, not Italian, French guy who could not speak English. So it was a fun little chat with him. That one looks like it's going to be excellent fun.
I'm just imagining what that chat was, because if I remember correctly, you told me you can't speak French very well either.
My French is terrible.
Yeah.
That's no secret. But yeah, walking around. For me, this event is less about playing games, because the only ones they really have there are Belgian and a few Dutch and French games. Like studios that are on the far east side of France might show up. There's a couple of them. A couple of developers that I knew showed up, good friends, but not showing off their games. They weren't in the expo, they were just there for the conference. Likewise, people from particularly the Netherlands will come over because it's, you know, same language, etc., so it's easy for them. But it's not big on indies. There were there 8 booths for indies? Our friends from Lucas Studios, Lucas Software, were there. You remember Liftoff?
Mm-hmm.
But they, I have a video clip that might be running in the background by the time people are looking at this, if they catch the YouTube version. And it's just their booth, it's just a laptop, and there's a girl standing next to it manning it, who's just a random that were there to get a free ticket or something, I don't know. Or she might have been a student at the school that arranged this thing. Nobody from Lucas Studio was there. They were there for the conference the day before, but by Saturday morning at least, nowhere to be seen. So it's just the laptop and a little piece of paper saying, yeah, the new game, can't even remember what the new game is called, but it's the new, they have a hacking game. So Liftoff, they continue working on, but now they're about to release a game about hacking computer networks. It looks really good, plays well. Yeah, that's one worth checking out. But it was just nothing except as a computer, A4 printed out with a name, and then a nominee badge because they were nominated for an award. And I sort of suspect they might have been getting a little bit affected the night before at the award show.
Happens to the best of us.
And then, of course, as I mentioned them already, Larian were there. They were sort of the big appeal that the CEO was supposed to be there to talk about Baldur's Gate, how they got the IP and how they were allowed to develop.
I saw that video.
Yeah,
They snuck into the Wizards of the Coast headquarters and stole the secret sauce potion or something like that.
And the talk from Larian. Now, I complained about them last year, where they were given a booth because they won Best Belgian Game last year, Divinity Original Sin 2. They were given a big booth at the event last year, and they just had, again, there was just a laptop and a piece of paper. A laptop just running a trailer. It's like, dudes, give the booth to some other indie.
Yeah.
Yeah, just go, we can't use it, we won't be there. Give it, feature somebody else. Larian does not need a free booth. I'm sorry. So them doing that and not doing anything else, that to me was a bit shitty last year. So this year, okay, the CEO comes, there will be a talk about what they did. This is interesting, right? In walks some other guy telling, yeah, the CEO won't be here because he's busy. Okay. Here's the video that you all saw online already. I mean, they played that. So, okay.
Well, I didn't jump on that earlier when you said something because
Yeah.
I was kind of waiting to save that topic till the end. But it was a news article out from Polygon today that mentioned that Baldur's Gate 3 is going to launch into early access on Steam sometime later this year. Now, the two things that surprised me about that is, one, I wasn't expecting it this year. And two, early access. That kind of surprises me a little bit. I would have thought they would have waited for a full-fledged game. But I guess maybe... In some ways, I think this can be kind of smart because they can release the game and open it up for early adopters to do the beta testing that maybe their in-house team can't do.
Yeah.
Well, you get free beta testing out of it.
Yes. And you remember N-Space and Swordcoast Legends. And games that weren't exactly like the gamers, the Dungeons and Dragons fans wanted.
Well, look,
It's the same crowd, mate. If
it is
isn't
going to be the
perfect-
same crowd. And you're going to have the hardcore tabletop folks that if things aren't exactly the way they are on tabletop, they're going to be upset about it. And I know one of the things that they screamed about at the time, and folks were very upset about, the hardcore D&D folks, was the fact that things were on cooldowns instead of having to rest. But you know what? I get why you would do that, because in a video game setting, it makes more sense than blowing all your spells and trying to rest for
It's not a tabletop
8
simulator.
hours.
There is literally a tabletop simulator that can do that for you.
Yeah. So I mean, I get why things like that changes would be made, and I'm not as critical. I don't begrudge folks that are critical about things like that, but I do think okay, you don't have to be excited about it. But before you just bash the entire game, at least take a look at it, But but anyway,
I don't think it's the hardcore tabletoppers who are going to come in and hate on Baldur's Gate. But I think people with rose-tinted memories of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are going to show
That could
up.
be another.
And if it doesn't trigger the memories, doesn't trigger the emotion that the memories triggered, there's going to be some complaining. And if they go into early access with something that has glitches, a lot of people are going to be upset. Early access with this crowd, I think, is dangerous. I think in most cases for a AAA title, this is a AAA title, whatever people want to say about the studio. I mean, they have 5 studios now. Larian is not small. There are early on that path, similar to, for example, Bethesda ZeniMax took. At this stage, it's full release. You can have public betas, but early access? No.
Right. Yeah, it might have been smarter to have a couple of public betas ahead of time instead of doing early access. True.
I mean, it's close ones. I will gladly come up to the studio. It's not that far from here. Ish. I mean, it's a train ride. I will help them test.
I'll take a free plane ticket.
Well, for you, it's up in... Where's the North America office?
Probably up in Seattle somewhere.
Yeah, it might be.
But, or it could be San Francisco. But I would kind of almost think, well, who knows?
And they had this, they were talking about it. They have all these studios, and why they were laid out the way they were laid out geographically was so they could always have a studio open. Then I was looking at the map going, you have from St. Petersburg to somewhere in the Pacific West, or Pacific area of the North Americas. Nope, that doesn't allow you to be open 24/7 unless you have some really weird opening hours. It only covers 18, 19 hours, not 24.
Well, depending on working hours, it might overlap a little. But
Yeah, but
part of the other thing that the article mentions is that both Larian and the co-developer Logic Artists uh, were delaying development on Divinity Fallen Heroes, which is the follow-up to Original Sin 2, as I understood it. So I guess that was originally supposed to be out in November of last year, but because they got Baldur's Gate, they pushed that out further. And I haven't heard when that, potential release window will be for that either. So that was another reason why, they were already working on Fallen Heroes. They pick up Baldur's Gate 3. They delay the other one, and I really did not expect Baldur's Gate 3 to be out this year. I thought it was going to go further, but it's funny because I keep seeing stuff on social media where on two sides, and this was another discussion that I remembered. You keep bringing up Sword Coast, but this is another thing I remember on the forums there, where there was people who were like dead set wanted turn-based, and there were other folks who wanted real-time.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing the same kind of thing with Baldur's Gate, where there are some folks who are praying it will be turn-based, and there are other folks that know of Larian from Divinity Original Sin, or like and remember the old Baldur's Gate, and are praying that it won't be turn-based. And I know that the funny thing is that to me, a lot of times the happy medium for that is real-time with pause. But even the turn-based folks have commented on that they're hoping it doesn't even do that. Like they want it strictly turn-based. So I personally don't care for turn-based. I would love to have it be more real-time, especially because you're going to have, cooperative environment with other players. And I've always felt that turn-based can be okay in a single-player game, but when you start adding 2, 3, 4 other players, which I don't remember if they said how many, it might be up to 4-player co-op, but I'm not certain, so don't quote me on that. It can, especially when one of those players really likes to take their time making a decision, it can really drag out encounters. So I don't particularly care for turn-based games, especially in a multiplayer environment.
No, I understand that, definitely. It's just different targets, and it's weird that we haven't seen. Like we've seen all the plane walker stuff. We've seen Magic the Gathering is probably the best example right now from that very same IP pool, where they have this simulator for playing big games. You can get Magic the Gathering online, and you can play it just like you would on tabletop. But there isn't a really good Dungeons and Dragons simulator, as far as I can tell. There are third parties that allow you to do a tabletop sim, but there isn't an official Wizard of the Coast blessed Dungeons and Dragons turn-based sim that I have seen.
That may be coming though. One of the things that they've said, and I heard this before, but Hasbro was also mentioning it at Toy Fair, I think New York Toy Fair this past week, is that there are 7 Dungeons and Dragons games in the works, and they're going to release between now and 2020? Was it 2024? Maybe I don't remember what the target dates were. It might be 2025. But anyway, 7.
Just give me Neverwinter Nights a sequel.
Well, and that's the funny thing, is because I think that's why so many people still play that game, is because of all the abilities that they had with that game to create your own modules, to mod in your own content, whether it was texture packs or creatures, scripting, all that stuff. I've worked on a couple of mods with a buddy of mine that were really well received. We did the Eye of the Beholder 1 and Eye of the Beholder 2 mods, and he put in so much more work than that. I barely scratched the surface with my assistance in that. All I'd worked on was dialogue and character backgrounds and stuff like that. But he did a lot of the design work recreating the original games in the Neverwinter Nights engine. He went out and sourced people who were able to create models for creatures that were in the original games that weren't in Neverwinter Nights, including things like the Beholder, because at the time that he released the first one, pretty sure there wasn't even a Beholder in Neverwinter Nights. So it was incredible, the amount of work and the amount of help he was able to get from the community to put all that in. If there was a Beholder, it didn't look as good as the one that he got sourced. But I don't think when Neverwinter Nights first came out, and when he released the first Eye of the Beholder mod,
there wasn't.
Yeah, I didn't think that there was. He didn't do too much. From what I remember, he didn't do too much with Neverwinter Nights 2. It was all still the first Neverwinter Nights game.
Well, the first Neverwinter Night came out as the original, and then 3 add-ons. And I'm pondering one of the add-ons might have had it.
I do think that one of the add-ons did have a beholder in it, but I still say that the one that he sourced from someone in the community, I wish I knew the name, and I apologize that I don't. But it actually, I think the one that he got from the community member would look better than the one that they professionally released. So,
But here's the thing: they just released. Well, is it fully released or is it still early access? A Neverwinter Nights upgrade. There's a company that
yeah,
rebuilt Neverwinter Nights
enhanced edition.
Enhanced Edition, and it doesn't enhance all the things that, in my opinion, were needed and that mods were doing.
Yeah.
I just wanted Neverwinter Nights open source. I would pay towards it if there was if they came out and said, if we get $1 million, we'll make open source. Sure. Here's some money for me.
Well, and I think that was part of the problem too with Swordcoast, as far as the expectation management was. It kept getting compared to Neverwinter Nights, and people kept expecting an experience like Neverwinter Nights.
Yeah,
and that was a big deal because it wasn't the module editor that they put together was fairly easy to use,
but it was
intentionally
dumbed down.
Right, and it just, there was nowhere near the same creative ability with it that there was with Neverwinter Nights. Yeah. So, and we keep mentioning Swordcoast because I think that's on our brain here, because we've been working on getting together with Tony Porter too. So you should see an interview coming up in the near future where we're going to get a chance to talk to Tony again. He was the audio director for Swordcoast, and he's been working on some other stuff since then. But he was a fun interview to have. He was what was his? I think his was around number 2. What was it, like 30 or 40 or something like that? Is when we had him on.
Don't remember, honestly. It
was a while back.
Yeah. That was, what I remember was at one point an hour has passed. Kind of go, whoops. Just yeah, it's good times. So yeah, Tony's coming on. I'm looking forward to that one. That's actually what we might have been supposed to be recording tonight. But instead you're getting us. Yay! So no.
But on that note,
to just wrap up, as I said, the Larian talk was useless-ish, but the big takeaway from it, the only takeaway that I had, was they don't particularly care, and then the only thing they're working on, that was sort of the big reveal, the only thing the studios are working on is Baldur's Gate. They're not working on anything else, which is weird, particularly if they're supposed to release now, because most studios that have two IPs or more will have one in full production, and then one slowly spinning up. And if they have 3, they'll have a third one that's winding down, that's transitioning to live, as they call it, or transitioning to support. And the idea that they're working full on just Baldur's Gate 3 and nothing else. Well, if they're releasing in 2020, they're going to have a gap where they have a full staffing and nothing to do. Because you can't just go from nothing to full staffing on a game. It's why they do this almost in waves. You staff up as you need it for a project, and then you staff down at the end. When you don't need the original designers, etc., you move them on to the next game. So as you pass through this process of a game, you can move people on to the next game. And at some point you get past that big hump and the game is done. The game is sent to goal, as I like to say. It is, at that point you remove, in some cases if you take, you like Destiny, 100 people and having to do something, well, move them on to the next game. All those graphic artists, sound artists, programmers, you name it, move them on to the next game. That has meanwhile been spinning up. If Larian doesn't have anything that's spinning up now, if they're releasing this year...
Well, again, it's releasing in... per Polygon article, it's releasing into early access this year. So I almost think that we're looking at probably an October, November, maybe even a December early access release date. And I wouldn't expect that would be the final game. It might even be till summer or fall of the final year before they do a final release.
I mean, there's still platforms they haven't released Original Sin 2 on. I mean, it's only out on, I think, Windows, Switch, PS4, PS3, PS2, PS1, Xbox. They've been releasing it on a lot of platforms. They've been trying to do a Bethesda. Skyrim.
More platforms equals more money.
Yeah. So they might try more of those. We don't know. But yay, Baldur's Gate is coming. I had fun in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2.
I did. That was one of those games where I kind of got annoyed with the trope that a lot of RPGs at the time, or ARPGs, were doing at the time, where you were amnesiac of your past. I got tired of that whole thing.
Dude, I can
like,
find you some, in my opinion, half decent original AD&D modules. You know, the gold booklets you would get as games. Yeah, that plays with that.
but just one thing I did want to jump right back to right before we close this off. I do truly hope that we get to see some Dragonlance games come out of this, because Dragonlance has been missing from the D&D landscape for a long time now,
You won't.
and I really want to see that come back.
I've said it before. I want Dragonlance live action TV show,
Oh yeah, I'd love that.
and I'm this close to just buying a domain, putting up a wiki, and start designing it and telling people come in and help me design, help write every episode, every season. Let's do that collectively as fans of Dragonlance. Make a TV show and then go to them and say, "Here, it's half done. Come on." But it won't, because the intellectual property, the stuff that we should have paid attention to at one-up conference, but I didn't want to, is a mess with Dragonlance. Wizard of the Coast says they own some of it. The books are owned by somebody else. The story, particularly, the actual books, are not owned by the same as created the content, the modules that is based on. Because the books that we know, the Dragonlance books, the Dragons of Autumn, Flame, Winter, Solstice, Spring, something, Summer, Poopy, whatever. They are based on modules that you could buy. It was sort of co-created. But even those are supposedly not owned by the same people. And then the movie and TV rights are an equal mess. So Dragonlance won't happen. There won't be anymore.
But see, why if WotC does own the tabletop rights, let's not say necessarily the story rights or the movie rights or whatever.
They can't put out a, as far as I understood from an article from a few years back, Wizard of the Coast cannot put out a Dungeons and Dragons Dragonlance game.
Oh, they don't have the video game rights, is what you're saying.
They don't have any game rights to, again, as far as an article said, I'd have to dig it up, but they don't have full enough rights to that whole mythos, to that setting.
Well, who has the game rights then? Let's go badger them.
Yeah, good, have fun, good luck. It's why everything is set in Faerun, which I find immensely boring. I'm sorry. I'm tired of hearing about the same drought time and time again.
I still enjoy those stories, but that,
Yeah, they're not bad stories per se. We were young back then, and the stories were naive, and so were we.
Yeah.
Yeah. They probably improved. I haven't read any of his later work. I liked, and the last Dungeons and Dragons I played was set in this, after the whole mess up. I think 4th edition introduced in Faerun that all the gods had died. They died in 3rd edition, if I'm not mistaken.
3rd edition, or 3.5, was the last edition that I had played with any regularity, and then there was a short period of time where I was playing I think about a year, where I was playing online with Tabletop Simulator with a group of folks in 5th edition. But somewhere in between that, and I think it was when 4th edition kicked off, and I looked at the rule set and was like, oh, hell no. I had no interest in playing like that. I was like,
let's not look at that.
Yeah,
so
but I think that's when they did that 100-year like fast forward. Where I think they were trying to reset a lot of things or something like that. But it sounded like
5th edition did a lot of resets, because 3rd edition ends with a lot of destruction of the Pantheon, timing-wise. So it's weird to refer to them as 3rd edition, because the timeline happens independent of the rule set, sort of. But with 5th edition, they also went, people didn't like what we did with all the destruction, all the gods, so let's slowly reintroduce and rekindle some of these old gods and get them back in. And I found that immensely boring, because all that destruction helped the environment if they knew what to do with it. So the last thing I played was a Drow Ranger. Yay! Just for the yeah, but with the wrong god, with wrong everything, and my DM was kind of like, I have no idea what you're doing. Actually, a ranger cleric, just for good measure.
That sounds to me just like you. You like to find the trolliest way to do something sometimes.
Oh, but it was. I will send you my background story, etc. It was done right. It was done properly. There were nothing to come for. Sorry. Yeah, for
All
some
right.
reason that gaming session didn't go very far. Not because of me, I think.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we'll close it out for the week. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us through this. Hope we brought some information to you that was of interest. As always, you like or share definitely helps, and we do appreciate it. Feel free to comment, ask us questions, and until next time, catch you later.
And remember to lick that like button.
Don't lick your screens. Don't listen to him.
Ciao.
But dire times. What a sight to behold, strange brigade. Watch out for fiendish foes, fixing